So, why do we want her on the podcast? If you're a business owner, obviously in the construction space, which is pretty much every one of you guys, and you're thinking about what's the next move, what does the future look like, have you prepared your business in such a way that if somebody did actually take a shine to your business, what would that look like for you in its current environment? Is it set up for success in that you could easily plug it into somebody else's business, or you could just sell it on, or maybe you might hand it over to your kids or to somebody else, like a management buyout, all of that good stuff. Doesn't matter whether you're a one-man band or whether you're a 100 million turnover company. It's irrelevant. The blueprint should pretty much be the same, and myself and Laurie are going to unpack that. She's got the expertise, I've just got the questions. Welcome to the show, Laurie.
What an intro, Gavin. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Where do we start? How did you get into construction? What's your construction story, Laurie?
Background is that I'm an operator in large companies, small companies, so global multinationals. My area of expertise has always been on the growth side. But when you're only responsible for top line, you're not seeing the bottom line. It's not the full picture. So when
Yeah.
I was recruited to come into a third generation company from a position of long-term succession, I was super excited.
Yeah.
As you said in my intro, I was a $100 million CEO. I was running that division. Total company in the US was over $1 billion in revenue top line. So it was a pretty big company.
Wow.
Um, I think there's a lot of interesting things about different industries. And actually, fun fact, the very first job I had at college was with Ingersoll Rand Company, and my group was the construction and mining group. So I got
Wow.
exposed to construction equipment when I was in my young 20s. We were making pavers and milling
Yeah.
machines and all kinds of things for big construction projects. But that said, my
Amazing company,
my
by the way.
what's that?
An amazing company.
An amazing company. I had a
Yeah.
great experience there. What I really learned, I carried through my whole career, which is how do you work with people at all levels, regardless. Some of my I call them my clients, internal customers were, welders, painters, sort of working with everybody, and then up to the office with people in suits and ties.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that served me well in my career. And, when I had the opportunity to run this business and I had P&L responsibility, it really opened my eyes to the bigger picture. I was so excited, Gavin. I thought, oh, I'm going to be here for 20 years. And I wasn't. I was there for 3. And the reason why was because we had an unsolicited offer. A big company, global company, was interested in acquiring this third generation 125-year-old business. My boss was the chairman.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the transaction closed. It was about 10 years ago. And it really opened my eyes to, wow, this is a pretty significant thing. I think the family did a lot of things right from one generation to the next. And then they did a lot of things right when it came to their people and how this transition, what it meant for the stakeholders. There were many people who became millionaires from this
Yeah.
transaction, and that's just incredible. Um, from there, after I left after the integration experience, I said, I've always orbited entrepreneurs and founders and owners. I've always orbited that space. Now's my time. Now's my time to set up my own shingle, and I want to serve that community in a really impactful way. And it's not the startup community, although I love them. It's not the startup community. It's the more mature business
Yeah.
that wants
Yeah.
to continue to grow and scale and serve the owners who one day want to have a successful exit, but they just don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And what I have found, you asked specifically, like, kind of, how did I get into the AEC industry? I think it was sort of by accident, but probably not really. I think your vibe attracts your tribe, as we say. And
Yeah.
I'm a fairly analytical person. My process has numbers, and we're not guessing, and hope is not a strategy. And I think that lends itself well to the folks I'll call my analytical owners. And when I
Yeah.
took a look at my 50 plus clients over the last several years, I realized that a very, very high percentage of them were in the AEC industry. And it's just been a great space. I think the owners who I work with, these are service businesses, as you know, what that feels like and
Yeah.
looks like. And there's some
Yeah.
challenges with that. And that just has always resonated with me. And so that's the short story.
Um, it's interesting. Um, just in the last couple of months, I'm noticing more and more of the manufacturing giants like Mitsubishi, for example, or Daikin, are out looking to purchase um, small to medium size. And I would say small to medium size, if I'm talking about maybe 400,000 upwards, that the manufacturers are actually buying up service companies. Has that been your experience in the States?
I don't know if I can really comment on that. I don't have any sort of examples off the top of my head, but in
Yeah.
general, just to say that's an interesting strategy because when we talk about growth for companies, there's two types of growth. One is organic growth, which is the things in our four walls that we quote unquote control, like our
Yeah.
marketing and our sales and our process, things like that. And then inorganic, or otherwise known as acquisitive growth, means, hey, we're going to go acquire something. And
Yeah.
why would we do that? Well, sometimes it's because we're filling a gap in in the market. So in the instances you're talking about in acquiring service businesses, if they're call them, product businesses, now they're saying, hey, we're going to stitch on something else. That's a classic, like, why would we buy this? Because it will take us longer and have more risk. Maybe speed to market is a challenge.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the team, hiring the team from scratch on the organic side, and kind of innovation Gavin, falls under organic, believe it or not. Right? If we're going to sort of start from scratch and innovate something new, it again, there's dimensions of pros and cons for both sides of this. So a lot of times companies will say, hey, we're going to go acquire this. The other reason why companies acquire businesses, and we see this a lot in tech, actually, especially in the States, is we call it acqui-hire. There's a certain skill set, or, let's say from a development team or services team, whatever that skill set is. And rather than hiring that team from scratch, we're going to buy them. And so
Mm.
acqui-hire is definitely a strategy. So back to your question, I don't know literally how to respond to that with examples, but I think
No.
it is a really important strategy. And I think for smaller companies, just the awareness that if you are able to grow in both ways, both organic and acquisitive growth,
Yeah.
if we're setting some growth targets for the future, it can be a very compelling strategy. It's not easy, just like anything,
Yeah.
but it's something that any company can buy another company. It's not just the big guys.
No, and I think I think when I speak to some business owners, they they have this 65-year-old mentality on a maybe 45-year-old head and shoulder in the sense. And what I mean by that, Laurie, is that generally if you're around the 45, 50 years old, you're kind of at that maturity stage where that you spoke about earlier on in terms of the mature business. Generally they would be in the business for at least 10 years. They've gone through all the scars, if you like, of the early setting up and getting things up and running. But they have this 65-year-old visionary person on the shoulder, if you like, that's saying, you need to get to retirement age. And it's amazing how many people I meet, and they have this sort of pensioner model of, I'm going to get to 65, that's when I can retire. I think in some cases it's 67, the retirement age is. But like, when you stop and ask them and say, well, why would you not retire now? They can't answer that question. And I'm fascinated by that. And the dynamic of that is that, especially in Europe, we have this persona that we have to get to retirement age and drive that business on until we're at retirement age, when you could easily just pick up the check today and take your value off the table today. And I don't think we do enough. I don't think we have enough of those conversations with ourselves as business owners.
I think you're right. I think that's fair, a fair observation. We can probably spend a lot of time talking about why that is. I suspect one of the main reasons is that we've got ourselves a very expensive job as opposed to creating an asset value. that's
Yeah.
transferable and eventually sellable and attractive to a potential buyer. It's a very different mentality, isn't it? Like if you're creating a job
Yeah.
for yourself and you think that one day you're going to have a retirement nest egg because of this business, but you're not setting your business up that way. It really, I actually have seen this happen in a couple, in some sense we can chat about, but it's sad, really. I think it's really
Yeah.
sad. And I think it's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm really motivated to get the message out to business owners sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Um, because ultimately, what are we really talking about? We're talking about running a well-run business. Like this is
Yeah.
not, a misnomer is that exit planning is like, oh, get your business fixed and ready and then you sell it. No, get your business fixed and better to run, more profitable, more enjoyable to run while you're running it. It's kind of like when you have
So,
your house, you're going
yeah.
to sell it and then you fix up your kitchen and then you leave. You're like, oh, I never got to use my new kitchen, you know?
Yeah, but
Um,
like pick it up and so or I would put it probably a little bit differently and say so that people want to buy it. It's so build it like as if people want to buy it, or build it so that people just go, wow, I'd love to own the brand Ferrari, or I'd love to own the brand, I don't know, Walmart or whatever. Like why not, have this proud feeling that people actually really want to buy what I have because they see I have all these great value systems and culture and great customers, great contracts, great branding, great visibility in the market, all that good stuff. Why not? You don't have to sell it, but you
yeah.
have all of these attributes that makes you the brand of choice in regards to your area, your location, and your discipline.
Fair. I agree with you.
So how do we challenge the business owners listening to this podcast and say, hey, stand up, you need to make a difference, you need to change the way you're thinking. What's that first conversation look like for you with people who probably are not woken up to this, um, or people that are but just not really sure whether it's the right time and have that 65-year-old mentality head on their shoulders?
Yeah, I work a lot with folks that are in the 50s, in their 50s, and they're 5 to 7 years out from a potential exit. And what I find is that they're puzzled by a lot of things, and then it's swirling in their head, and they can't settle in on a direction because they don't, one, they don't have the right people around them to help them make good decisions, and two, on those particular issues, and then two, there's just sort of that lack of clarity. So it's this giant puzzle. Like, where do we go? Who do I work with? What do I have to do next? Sometimes there's a crisis and that drives us to action. Other times it's you get advice from someone and you go down that path and you realize, oh, wait, I can't do more because I don't know the next thing. That's a story with one of my clients. He owns an electrical contracting, commercial contracting business. And his immediate pebble in the shoe was, I have an expiring insurance policy. But it's really more than that. You can't just renew the policy. We got to really look at what is it you're trying to accomplish. When you first got the policy 10 years ago, it was a really different circumstance than what it is now. Um, and so a lot of times, Gavin, when I'm talking to business owners, I really just try to understand what's the biggest pebble in the shoe right now.
Mm,
But then you got to unpack it because it masks some other things. So with
yeah.
this particular client, yes, of course we have to address the insurance issue, but it's more than that. Now, because he's in his mid 50s, now it's really about uh, what's the buy sell look like. We have to refresh the buy
Mm,
sell agreement. He has siblings in the business, they don't want to own it. His wife definitely doesn't want to own it if something happens to him. So we have
mm,
some protections we need to kind of just get the paperwork done, which is related to the business, but it's also related to his personal estate. And so
mhm,
we got to get the attorneys in there, tax advisors in there to kind of just
mhm,
look at everything. Um, Related to that, which I think is a really important kind of, hey, if you are the business owner and you got to look in the mirror. So if you're listening to this and saying, all right, you know, how do you sort of check in on if this is something Lori and Gavin are making sense to you? I would say if you have a inability to really separate from the business, like if can you take a vacation or take a holiday and you're checking email, you're checking a phone, you're calling in, you're second guessing people, you're worried something's going to break. That's a signal. That's a flag. Boop, boop, boop. We're waving a flag. That is a really big signal. And, take a test on it. Do a half a day, do a day,
Yeah.
do two, work your way up to a week. Uh, give yourself the personal challenge on this, because when you stress test time away, you get to see where the issues are. And so, hey, why not learn and then make it an okay thing if something doesn't go well? It's okay.
Yeah.
Take it and
Yeah.
learn, and then reset. And then when you take that time away the next time, then you can do it. I have a client that just went on holiday for a week, and I asked him yesterday, I said, be honest. He's in his 40s. And I said, be honest, he's got young kids and stuff. He said it was great. I really unplugged, felt great. And he came back refreshed, and now they're getting ready for a leadership retreat and stuff like that. And his mindset was in the right spot. Now he broke his toe, but that's unrelated. So unrelated to any stress. But no, I think it's all part of the mindset, and if we have a business that can't thrive without you as the owner, it's not a healthy business, and it's probably not healthy for you either. I'd sort of check in on your mental health. I would check in on your health, your personal health, medical health. Oh my gosh, I talked to a architecture firm the other day, and one of the partners said, this job is killing me. And I'm sorry, that's not healthy. What have we done to improve that? The answer was not much. Um, those are the things that obviously worry me for their personal well-being. It worries me for the firm and for the
Yeah.
success of the firm, because there's serious gaps. If you're the sole owner, proprietor, and you're running more than 50%, on full tilt, I mean, you're going to burn out, right? Or
Yeah.
if you're responsible for you're the breadwinner, you're bringing in the rainmaker, you're bringing in the money, leading up sales, business development, and no one else is really contributing the way you need them to. And the business is fully relying on you for certain things. Most
Yeah.
commonly sales. There's other things too, running projects, whatever it may be. That's also a huge red flag. So these are the things I'm saying. Look in the mirror and really check in.
Yeah.
And we can identify in a variety of ways, how you spend your time and where you should be spending your time. And it's a lot of times, Gavin, it leads back to the owner dependency problems.
Mm. Yeah, I get that. I definitely buy into the healthy mind, healthy body, healthy business model. And obviously fitness and mental health and putting yourself in the best shape. So, like, obviously, if you're an athlete, professional athlete, you'll train to be at the top. But you also, if you're at the top of the lonely tree of entrepreneurship, you should be putting time and investment into your medical and physical health. I'm glad you brought that up, actually. It probably is one of the it's probably one of the conversations that they don't expect to have with you when you speak to them. You say, hey, look, with all due respect, you don't look like you're in great shape, and you want to put your business in great shape. So, like, everybody has their own sort of demons to do it in terms of time and energy, and how do you manage your time and energy. And for whatever reason, we seem to have this default where if if we're not putting in a certain amount of hours in the day into the business, we feel like we're not achieving, or we're cheating the business, and it's a joke. Like, I'm completely turned the other way around, whereas I would like to get the best value in the shortest time with the best results. And whatever is left in the rest of the day is either up to my medical and physical health, or whatever I choose it to be.
Yeah, 100%. I think we all have to budget our time. I have a concept for myself and my clients I try to talk about is a return on time as a measurement, which means for each hour I'm spending, or half an hour, whatever increment you want to give it, am I getting the best return for my firm and the best return for me? So,
Yeah.
hey, let's extend that to relationships outside of work. If you have friends with negative energy, they're just bringing you down, give that a real hard look. Like, we're all reaching the point in our lives where we can make choices about who we spend our time with. We're not in high
Yeah.
school anymore. And I think that's true in the workplace. Sometimes people, owners, CEOs have a hard time letting folks go. Maybe you gotta fire your brother. Maybe you gotta
Yeah.
fire your grandpa. On my podcast, somebody talked about that once. Like, yeah, I had to fire my grandfather. That wasn't easy. Um, but those are the things. Like, if they're not right for your organization, that can be
Yeah.
part of the kind of this check-in process of really, like, another concept, Gavin, is the mood elevator. I don't know if you've ever kind of thought about it, but like,
No.
when I meet with my clients, a lot of times it's like this. It's on remote because my clients are all over the country, and the U.S. is a big place, right? And so,
Yeah.
I'm looking at them on camera, but I can just tell if they're in another place, right? If their mind is kind of elsewhere, and the mood elevator, whoop down or whoop up, and it's something that something's bringing you down. What is it, right? It's customer
Yeah.
problems, it's employee problems, it's supply problems, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
if you have relationships that are unhealthy, like, that's another good place to start, is surround yourself with the people that are going to lift you up, not bring you down.
I agree 100%. Definitely a lesson I took out of my own book was to remove people that were just eating up space and time in terms of, you know, getting caught up into conversations that were not of a benefit to you personally, financially, from a work perspective or from a family perspective. And there's a podcast in that, Laurie, as you're well aware, as regards, you could go into a whole conversation on that topic alone in terms of, you know, you're the average of the sum of the people you hang around with. It's the same in business. If you hang around with the right people in business, generally, you'll all sort of have the same viewpoints, and your business will generally follow the same flow. There's a lot of research in behind that as well. But likewise, if you attract negative people into your business, and if you're doing work for negative customers, or negative clients, that generally has an impact on your business as well. I'm sure you're aware or have seen examples of that yourself.
Yeah, I've had clients tell me how they've had to really go through and fire clients of theirs. They just weren't the right fit. Or I just had a conversation yesterday with a friend who runs an insurance business, and she said, "Yeah, the last couple of years we've really tried to be mindful. We have a smaller team. We some clients have fired us. In other instances, we fired them. Just finding the right fit. Fit is important in all dimensions, whether it's fit of your employees, the markets you serve, how you're showing up, and then likewise, when you're ready to have an exit, it's all about fit of who should own your business after you. It's one of my favorite chapters in my book because it's all about
Yeah,
fit. And we can talk all day long about who we think might be a right fit, but if you don't start exploring and really thinking it through, build with the exit in mind is a great phrase. And
100%.
having a sense of where those next steps could take you, at least from a category bucket, strategic, financial, or internal, because the decisions you'll make are potentially very different in terms of those exit paths.
Talk to me about Built by Design, Laurie. What is Built by Design?
Built by Design is my advisory practice in a box, and I'm licensing it to other advisors, financial advisors in the US who are also interested in having conversations with business owners about the number one thing they think about all the time, which is bum, 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 their business. And if you think about your wealth advisor, professional, person who's hired to help you manage your portfolio, well, if the average business owner, the opportunity for that net worth growth is really coming from the business over time, the wealth advisor doesn't have that on the balance sheet at all. The personal balance sheet is missing potentially the biggest asset. Now, for the startups and the folks who aren't investing in the business, it's just a job. Okay, fine. It is what it is, right? The startups have a ton of potential. Great. The mature companies that aren't done yet, and the owners who say, "Wait a minute, I can really grow the value. I'm interested in growing the value of this business. What is my
Yeah,
business worth today? What could it be worth, and how does it fit into my total picture of my net worth pie?" And for many, many owners, it's got that opportunity to be 80% of the total net worth or more. So, what I've built is called Built by Design. It's intended for use by advisors with their clients to have conversations, and like I said, it's in a box. It's really turnkey, and business owners get essentially my book kind of turned into a master class, and then the conversations are happening with their trusted advisor, and I think that's super important. So my mission is to not have every client in the world. I'd rather have an army of people working with business owners to help get them a message out sooner that you matter, how you transition your business matters to your stakeholders, and that it is possible for you to increase the value of your business over time, and you should be measuring it.
Very good. So B stands for blueprint, vision, and firm model. U stands for unlock operational bottlenecks. I stands for integrate systems and team. L stands for lead with clarity, not chaos. And T stands for transition with confidence and control. Very good. Very good. So you basically put your own roadmap together, and then you educate others on how they can do how we can create a sort of a franchise model, if you, for want of a better phrase, of how you do this for other clients, but how other people could do it for their own clients.
Exactly. I work with
Yeah.
clients one-on-one for strategic implementation. And yeah, the B is really important, the blueprint, because that's the goal setting. It's personal
Yeah.
goals, it's financial goals, and it's business goals. And these are not the things that I like to say, you're not going to put it on Front Street. This is not your
Yeah.
management meeting. This is your owner meeting. And
Yeah.
as your owner, if you have a business partner or your spouse is in the business, let's align, let's align and get everybody on the same page. What's the intended exit timeline, if we can use the word exit? I usually say transition timeline, but exit kind of almost like forces the conversation. We also talk about contingency planning. If something happens to you, what would happen? And a lot of cases, this actually happened to, it's sad. It was one of my clients. He died suddenly in the obituary, and I don't know what actually happened, so I don't want to assume anything, but um, I actually assumed the worst, that maybe he took his own life. The business was in a lot of trouble, and when he met me and I started working with him, it was in a really bad place. He was in a bad place, and I had gotten to know him. He had opened up about some of the issues that he was facing, but then it was not fulfilled. Like, I wasn't actually able to help him all the way through. But if I had to try to help his spouse, which I tried, to say what his wishes were, I knew that his
Yeah.
wish was that his son was going to maybe take it over. But I think, just like in many of these situations, the wife inherited it when he passed, and then she had to deal with the estate. And there's a shock, and there's sad, and now you got to figure this out, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
So the other message I have for everybody is, look, the blueprint here is as much about growth as it is kind of risk management and protecting value. You have to do
Yeah.
both. I mean, that's exactly why the subtitle of my book is what it is that you've got to
Yeah.
create valuable exit options, and you've got to also kind of avoid the traps and avoid the risks, um,
You've,
and
you've, you've hit
manage
the nail
both.
on the head.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like risk management, like, I don't know. I think it's actually underrated or not focused on enough in terms of business and how businesses operate. I think the risk, I don't know, you're closer to the scene than I am, but speaking to business owners, and I talk to them about, and when we talk about risk management, I'm not talking about health and safety risk. I'm talking about every type of risk that could happen to a business to make it go down. I don't think we do enough in that. I honestly feel that as business owners we don't focus enough on that area. And I'm not saying to the point that we become paralyzed by not making the right decisions or not moving forward. But Christ, like, at least have some sort of a risk profile of your business. And one of the biggest risks can be yourself.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree, and I think it's a balance. As I said in my intro, I'm grow, 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 right? I'm a grow person, and what I've learned and what I share with my clients is that we have to be balanced. So it's growth, but it's also kind of the downside protection. You've worked so hard to build your business. If something happens to you, what would be the next step? And you've got
Yeah.
stakeholders, you've got employees, you've got customers. So I call it the bus book. Like if you get hit by a bus, it's kind of terrible. But if you have a bus book, that's good, right? That's just contingency stuff, and there's
Yeah.
stuff on the bus book you just got to have. You just got to do it. Are you ever
Yeah.
going to use it? Hope not, right? It's like
Yeah.
a friend of mine who sells insurance products said only, or actually, this came from an attorney, but anyway, it doesn't matter. He said that only 1% of these, call it the buy sell insurance policies. I don't know if you have the same mechanisms in the UK, but I can explain if you need me to, or you want me to. So anyway, insurance that helps fund in a situation like that. So the surviving spouse basically gets kind of a tax-free situation, and then the business goes to the people who are associated with the buy sell agreement or a trust, depending how you set it up. And it's good. It's a good practice. It's a good practice,
Yeah.
but only, and then only 1% actually execute. So it's kind of, then people think, well, why should I do this? But it's like,
Yeah.
okay, but if you don't, so
Yeah.
I have a client in his 70s, and if something happens to him, it's going to his wife. And believe me, it is not what she wants. And now she's going to have to deal with it. And she's in mourning, and it's a crisis.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
you got to think of the next step kind of, and almost like chess, like you almost have to think of the second exit. Because let's say you put together a trust, and an ILET is the acronym in the US for a mechanism where if something happens, the business goes into the trust pays the surviving spouse with an insurance, policy. Okay. So the trust owns the policy kind of thing. And then, okay, so now the trust owns the business, but what's the second exit after that? Well, there might not be. That could be the answer. Is it sort of an exit without an exit? The trust owns it, and then the proceeds sort of, if the business is doing distributions over time. Okay, cool. Or eventually, it could become. I know in your community, EOT, Employee Ownership Trust, is an option here.
Management buyout.
EOT
Yeah.
and management buyout, or
Mm.
ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan managed by our
Yeah.
government regulations. And so there's options on the second exit, but it's sort of like what I see is in the chessboard or checkerboard, people are only taking one step. They're not sort of thinking it through all the way. Makes me a little
Yeah.
bit nervous, but hey, at least get to the first, just get to the first move.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the watch out and not doing anything. I would say just
Well, there's
if you
also
die,
there's
who
also
gets your business? And if it's your wife and she's going to freak out and not know what the heck to do, think of her.
yeah. So we're talking about succession planning here. We're talking about crisis management, and we're talking about risk management. Like, let's just put it into basics. If you do not have this in place, and have someone like yourself or companies like yourselves to advise you to put this structure in place, you could face a scenario where 40% of the value of your business could be handed over to government and taxes because of and I have to say the word negligence, because ultimately it is negligence not to have this plan in place or this model in place. And I'm not trying to put the fear of God into people, but I am. Like, wake up. Like, if you've got bad health, or if you think you're going to head into bad health over the next couple of years, or you feel that, back to that's still sticking in my head, that guy said that, pretty much he didn't like coming to work every day. One of your clients, that's, it's affecting his health. Like, that's the time to put on the handbrake and go, okay, hold on a minute. Let's start putting in provisions here to sell the business, so that, my wife, for example, is not business oriented. She didn't want to know much about the business. She's fully supportive of me, has always been, but like doesn't want to touch anything got to do with it. Fine. So why not sell it now and put it into a bigger form, a better form, or put it into a more mature model that allows you to sort of take the pressure off yourself, continue to run the business, take a big check off the table today. And if, for example, you do get sick, or you unfortunately do pass away, all that intricacies of the detail of who did what, who said what, how is things going to get done. All those conversations are all gone. They've been preempted and taken off the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think that back to the timeline conversation, because if we're anticipating selling the business in maybe the next 5 years, do we have to do all this complicated trust work and insurance work? Maybe not. I'm not saying everybody has
Mm.
to do all of that. But if we think, hey, we're going to ride this out for the next 20 years, then okay, it's probably worth taking a look at some of these things. So I agree with you. And the other thing I do like to say is let's create options instead of pressure and
Love it.
not wait until there's a crisis.
Yeah.
Like if we've reached the point where, I had shared about this person saying this business is killing me. I actually feel like that's too late. Don't let it get that bad,
Yeah.
because then you're almost like, oh, I just want anybody to take this off my hands because I'm having a health issue or I'm getting divorced. And, we don't want to race to the bottom on this thing. I think all of us want to sell at market value or above market value. That should be our
Yeah.
goal. If you're facing any of the crises of disaster, disruption, divorce, death, like all the D's, we call them the 5 Ds. I think there's probably 6 of them or even more.
Yeah.
But, then you're selling at a discount, the other D. So, or you're
Yeah.
closing your doors. That's the other D. There you go. Yeah. And so, yes, this is an important conversation because ultimately, if people are hearing us, Gavin, and they're hearing the message that create a better business to run now, it'll be more attractive and transferable. It'll have the eye of the buyer. And then in the private market, the buyers are obviously going to set the price. You can't go on Yahoo and look up your enterprise
Yeah.
value.
And it could be
So it's a
it could be
negotiation, make it ready to sell at any time. That is the
uh,
message. Have a business
yeah.
that can be sold at any time.
And on the flip side of things, Laurie, they might very well say, well, actually, I don't want to get into the situation of getting ready to sell. I want to scale. So what does that look like? So you might go on an acquisition model as opposed to selling your own business. Well, why don't we acquire some businesses over the next 5 to 10 years? And why don't we create this environment where we're just going to build up more value in the business and then have an exit in year 10 or 12 or something like that? Like that's still a bigger picture plan, but like, I think I keep coming back to this, but the amount of construction companies, small to medium, mature companies that don't actually have a live dynamic business plan that they go back to every now and again and go, okay, where were we on the business plan last year? And are we on point to deliver what we said we were going to do from last year and updating it for this year? Like they might have meetings and they might have, minutes of meetings and stuff like that, but there's no joined up strategy in the form of a business plan uh, that I'm seeing, and I'm seeing companies going bust in the UK. Like you're probably not as aware, but there's some major companies in the UK going bust. Now, there is other reasons for that, but ultimately, it's down to risk management again.
Yeah, I can't comment specifically on that. I think there's lots of reasons why companies don't make it, and in the call it the privately held sector where we don't have other investors, that we're bootstrapping, we are the founder, we've created this entity. Sometimes the company dies with the founder. It's just not going to transition to another. There was a cement company here locally, and the niece called me and said, "Hey, I'm just calling on behalf of my uncles, and I'm just curious. And here's the situation: they are not doing much in business development. They're kind of just coasting along. They're both getting older, so they're doing the labor, but they're slowing down. They more residential kind of work here. I guess some commercial too. So let's say both." And I said, "Okay, well, tell me about the contracts. Are there any contracts?" "No." "Okay. Do they have any clients that have long-term relationships?" "Yes." "All right. Okay. Who are they?" She named them. And I said, "Look, here's the situation. This company isn't going to sell because their competitors aren't going to buy a business that they'll actually be better off if this one doesn't exist."
Wow.
I had to be blunt about it. I mean, that was the reality. There's no win there for the competitors to buy them.
Wow.
And what is it they're actually getting? They're not getting any
Yeah.
any
And the
value.
IP. Yeah.
No.
Wow.
So, there's sad stories like that that are across we call Main Street, for the Main Street businesses that are, let's just say from an economy standpoint, maybe under 1 million in revenue, under 2 million in revenue, US dollars. Um, so those are Main Street. And then larger than that, for folks that want to grow and have a growth mindset, I think having a transition mindset is part of it. It's a big thing I talk about in my book and on my show all the time. If we have a growth mindset, we're open to the things that could help evolve our business, help evolve our employees, help evolve all our stakeholders and our community. And it's a healthy thing and it's actually fun. And it's a fun part of life, And I think from a transition standpoint, you mentioned planning. In my book, what I essentially advocate for is strategic transition planning. And it's something as I liked how you phrase it. You just set the plan and then you revisit it from time to time. But if we
Mm,
never have a plan, we never write our goals down, we're less likely to achieve them. And we're gonna
mhm,
kind of wave in the wind and go in different directions. Hope is not a strategy. We have to have a plan. And you can
mhm.
change your plan. I love having options and exploring options and then seeing which ones are the ones to kind of double down on. And for growth, yeah, I mean, growth can come from process improvement, just getting tighter on accounts receivable. My goodness, start with cash flow. I know in
Yeah.
the service trades, it can be tricky, but there are things in the service trades that we can improve upon. One of them is what's your cash management and looking at your receivables and payables. Um, so anyway, I think there's a number of things. And when it comes to acquiring a company, there's something called the 5 and 20 rule, to quote my friend John Warlow. So the 5 and 20 rule basically says a company buying another company is either 20 times its size in revenue, down to 5 times its size in revenue. So
Wow.
what's the message on that? Well, it just gives you a range, right? So if you're 5 million in revenue, you're looking to buy 1 million in revenue company, right?
Mm,
Why is that? Well, sometimes it's because we just, one fish eating another fish, like you can't sort of consume too much. And in other cases, it has to do with debt service. So the mechanics of a transaction and in my background, I don't know if I spent much time on this in my introduction, but I did work in M&A for years, and being able to work with a client on a transaction, setting up the how this is going to get structured, talking with buyers about financing, what they're looking for, and in the smaller size deals, Gavin, a lot of times buyers are asking for seller financing. Some sellers are totally fine with it, others are not. There's reasons to do it, reasons to not do it, that kind of thing. But that becomes part of it is what's the financing package? And we have to be able to service the debt, whether it's a commercial note from a bank or whether it's, to the seller. And so that's the other reason for the 5 and 20 is you just have to be able to, the nature of the deal has to make sense.
Okay, so I think that's so insightful. Okay, and for the listeners and the viewers, I think we should just double down on that 520 rule because the fact that you said that is so on point. Like that's a massive take home. The way I read it, okay, so you can correct me if I've misread you or misunderstood the 520 rule. But basically, if I'm a 5 million turnover business, I should be looking at companies who are 20 times that, up to 20 times that, in order for them to buy me in a mature way that allows for all the risk to be taken off the table, allows the buyer to have the right capacity and the right structures and the right programs and the right people to bring me on to the next level, so the whole deal doesn't collapse because you know they don't have capacity to sort of drive this on to the next generational growth of where that business needs to be.
Yes,
Did I
and
get?
I think that's fair. And then the other side of that I should mention is why does it sort of stop on the top? And are there exceptions to this? The answer is of course, right? But
Yeah,
in one of the cases where it's very not so common is let's say you have a publicly traded company that's acquisitive and looking for good deals, and they want to stitch in some companies. It takes them as much time to do
yeah,
a deal with a small
yeah,
business than it does a large business. So
yeah.
it's just for the return on time concept and an ROI in the
Doesn't add up.
business, it's just worth it to do a larger deal than a smaller one.
Wow,
So
wow.
that's the other kind of when it comes
Well,
to fit, who's the right fit buyer, we could also talk about, well, who are the buyers? There's different categories
Yeah.
of buyers. There's different needs that they have. There's different problems they're solving or potentially not solving. And there's a lot of dimensions to who's the right fit. But I think the 5 and 20, I would say, is most relevant for the strategic buyer category. So these are the
Wow.
other companies, competitors, adjacencies in
Yeah.
the industry, customers, frankly. A financial buyer is more of an institutional buyer, could be a private
Yeah.
equity group, et cetera. Could be an EOT is a mechanism of a financial transaction, and then a financial buyer. And then the last category is related buyers or related internal, right, which could be management or family, most
Yeah.
commonly.
And just on the broker side of things, I take it you advocate for a broker when you do go to sell.
I would. I mean, if we have experience in running our business and we don't have experience selling our business, because we usually typically only do it once, why not have the
Yeah.
right people on your team around you that can support you in the process? Yeah. I mean,
What's the
I hear it
general?
all the time. It's just not my opinion. It's from business owners themselves saying, I did this and here are the mistakes I made. It's just,
Yeah.
why take that risk? You got one shot at this, maybe. Meaning
What's
you
the
have one business to sell, do it the right way.
do it the right way? You're only going to do it once.
Right.
What about what's the sort of figures in the States that brokers generally charge? I think it's in around 3% in Europe in terms of the overall the value in terms of the written check. The broker generally take a fee for consultancy, and then I think it's in around 3% in the UK and Ireland anyway.
In the States, we have different, most commonly we see it's sort of by success fee is banded by the total transaction value. And so there's some standards that are used based on the size of the transaction. So that's common. In other cases, it's milestone achievements. So might have an upfront, and then you have milestone achievements, and then there's a success fee. So there's some of
Yeah.
that. Sometimes there's bonuses if you achieve certain sales price. Here's what I say. Look, you're going to have a transaction, and I would budget in your mind between 20 to 30% is going to be for people helping you. Probably just go with 20%. So that includes
Yeah.
the lawyers, that includes the accounting and tax, that
Yeah.
includes the brokers. And then that way, if it's less than that, great. But just have a mental note, like, this is not selling your business on a budget.
No. No. And what are the multiples in the States for AEC companies? What sort of multiples are they getting at the moment?
Again, this is a giant it depends,
Yeah.
because what I see, as a practitioner and somebody who does valuations, I have to answer from a it depends process. So the first thing we look at is size of the business. What we see in the data is that top line 25 million in revenue, you call turnover, right? So 25 million in turnover, there's an inflection point on multiples. So already
Okay.
off the bat, there's kind of a quote unquote discount for smaller companies. So now, like what you and I were saying earlier, right?
Yeah.
Take that to the, hey, do we want a premium price or we want a discounted price? So why is there a discounted rate for smaller companies? There's a discount because they're assumed to have owner dependency challenges, which represents risk for the buyer. So any buyer risk is going to mean a discount. So the multiples in a range are
Yeah.
really reflective of number one, the industry. So different industries, and I'm just talking US, I can't speak to any other
Yeah.
country, but in the US, different industries have different multiples. First off,
Yeah.
okay. One of the things driving that, and because you could say, well, what's the top? Well, the top's tech. Why? Because a lot of times the multiple is a multiple of revenue. So let's
Mm.
have a conversation about that. Why is there a multiple of revenue in tech? Because in many times there is something driving a predictability of future cash flows, which could be subscription revenue and things of that
Mm.
nature. So those kinds of companies are going to see higher multiples and multiples of revenue.
Yeah.
Boop, right? So put a pin in that.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to service businesses like construction, architecture, engineering, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to have project revenue. We don't have recurring revenue. So that puts us in a
Mm-hmm.
whole other category. And depending on the size and nature of the business, we might be measuring more like a multiple of net operating income with some adjustments for owner discretionary expenses and things of that have been flowing through the company. So we have to do what we call
Yeah.
adjusted, right? So we do an
EBITDA.
adjustment for all of that, the ups and the downs. And then
Yeah.
we can get to an adjusted EBITDA number if we are going to replace our role as the owner and president or whatever with another role. And that number, the adjusted EBITDA number, is what we put a multiple on. So just a little quick math for people, because one, you got to realize if you have expenses flowing through the business, like I had one homeowner, residential home builder, and he put a new barn on his personal property, and that expense was in the company. He also has his we get a lot of snow sometimes, so he had the snow removal, the landscaping, those service fees for his personal residence in the business.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't asked him about it, you would never see it. It wasn't called out, right? And so
Yeah.
we've buried some things in our business expenses because we think it's saving us tax. But at the end of the day, if you're not protecting the bottom line number, oopsies, take a look
Yeah.
at that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So get clean books. Like it's okay to have owner expenses, but like put them in a category where you can go back later and show a buyer that, yeah, these are add backs and this is why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's another thing that drives the multiple, right? You got to look at the bottom line number. And then a lot of times, what do buyers care about? They are going to pay you for what you've built. They're not going to pay you for the future. But at the same breath, they want to know what your growth potential is. So
Yeah.
they're not paying you for that unless it's really high predictable contracted revenue. And that's why the revenue multiple exists.
And that's why you need a really good broker who brings in a mature conversation and is able to say to you or to understand your business inside out so that they can then represent you in such a way that it's not going to damage you going forward, because it's 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 not a good look for the broker to fit you with the wrong buyer, and they'll give you that advice and support to say, hey, not a good fit for you, this is a better fit for you. And you might think, oh, no, it's definitely these. And no. And I've seen that from friends of mine that have sold, where they sometimes the buyer that you think is the right buyer is not always the right buyer. The buyer
Agreed.
persona, yeah, it needs to be figured out. We've gone over the time here, Laurie. So
we could talk all day, Gavin. I got more too. I
got
should
more
come back.
coming.
We'll do a part two.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do a part two. A couple of curveball questions before I let you go. Knowing what you know now, Laurie Barkman, what would you do different in life?
I would have bought a business.
Very, very clear on that. There was no flinch. Didn't bat an eyelid. It was like, boom, I'd have bought a business.
Yep.
Not
I just
built a
did not.
business.
When
Not
I was
built a
going,
business.
when I was going through my MBA program, everybody was doing the tech startup thing. I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't have the risk profile to get venture capital money. And so I went into corporate and I went into startups and everything. And now I understand that buying a business is very viable and can be very lucrative,
Lucrative,
and
yeah.
it's entrepreneurship, absolutely, without it's different dimensions of risk. That's what I would have done.
I love it. Definitely, I think we're going to have you back on the podcast again, Laurie. If people want to contact you, the website for anybody that's listening or watching is BT Sherpa, as in SHERPA.com, and you'll find Laurie there. But Laurie, how do you want people to contact you? What's the best way?
Yeah, they can go to the website, as you said, btsherpa.com. And there's a contact button for me there if they want to connect there. Also on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, so they can always find me there. And my email, if they just want to email me directly, is my name, LAURIE at btsherpa.com. I would love to connect. One goodie that I want to offer to your audience, if they're thinking about succession and they kind of have want to put some thoughts together, here's a quick assessment. It's btsherpa.com/succession. Hopefully that's easy to kind of find and get to. The assessments are on my website, and they can take this very quick succession assessment. It helps them think through, is my next successor in my company or not? And I see this a lot in the service industry and trades and the AC industry. We think they are, but maybe we're not. We're off the mark. So this is hopefully helpful, and they'll get emailed the assessment results. Happy to talk to folks about their assessment if they want to.
Laurie, you've been an absolute pleasure to be a guest on our show. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's for anybody out there listening and watching, you know, definitely over the weekend, have a really good think about your business and where the risk is within your business. What's going to come up, creep up, and bite you, and you know, where do you pick up the pieces? What's left in the pieces? Have you put enough of what we call a moat around your business, where you've built this, you've got the castle, and have you got this moat structure around you, so that all the good work and all the achievements and all the success and all the hardship and hard work you've put in, that doesn't go for nothing if something goes wrong, that you've got a legacy left over for everybody that is loved around you, and including your employees and your clients. Laurie, thank you very much. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. And again, thanks very much for being a guest.
Gavin, my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.